the panel conversation, we'll open that up so you'll have the opportunity to ask any questions that come up. Also, I want to let you know that we're going to be recording this tonight just for promotional purposes, potentially in the future, not necessarily for anything specific, but just wanted to give you that heads up. It's another reason why we ask you to please keep your recording off. I think that's it for right now. I'm going to pass it over to my colleague Annie at Gastro Obscura, and she's just going to chat with you for a minute.
Hey everyone, how's it going? So this online experience is part of Gastro Obscura, and our mission is to inspire wonder and curiosity about the world through food and drink. So that's through our articles, our videos, and our guides, and those show what food and drink reveals about the places where it's made and the people who make it. And we partner all the time with chefs, historians, and the wonderful people you see here to help travelers and curious people experience culinary wonders firsthand. And also be sure to check out our parent website, which is atlasobscura.com, for more amazing stories and incredible live and online experiences in the Atlas Obscura community. And this is all part of our Wonder from Home initiative, where we're kind of bringing the world to you when we're all kind of just in our living rooms at the moment. And I'd just like to reiterate that the best way to view this experience is through speaker view, and that's at the top right of your screen, and then you'll be able to see all the amazing panelists as they speak. And I'm going to hand it back to Sari, and have a great time, guys.
Thank you, Annie. All right, I just want to quickly introduce our speakers tonight. I'm sure you are all so excited to hear them speak. First, of course, we have Chef Michael Salamanov coming at you from Philadelphia. He is the executive chef and co-owner of Zahav in Philadelphia, in addition to many, many restaurants in Philadelphia. But that one in particular is the trailblazing restaurant that put the rich melting pot of Israeli cuisine at the forefront of dining in America today. He is the co-author of 3 cookbooks and the recipient of 3 James Beard Awards. We have Adeena Sussman, like I said, coming in from Tel Aviv. She is the author of Sababa, Fresh Sunny Flavors from My Israeli Kitchen, which was named a Best Fall 2019 cookbook by the New York Times, Bon Appetit, and Food and Wine. And I am so excited to hear that she's working on her follow-up to Sababa. And then we have the lovely Gabriella Gershenson. She is a James Beard Award nominated food journalist based in New York City. She's been an editor at Saveur magazine, Rachel Ray Every Day, and Time Out New York, and is a contributor to the Wall Street Journal. Good piece out today, by the way, by her. She's an editor of the recently published books, The 100 Most Jewish Foods and the IACP Award nominated Hummus. All right, well, I'm passing it over to Gabriella now to take it away, but just quickly reminding you that chat Q&A will be at the end, so please hold your questions until then. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Sari and Annie and MOFAD and Gastro Obscura and Atlas Obscura for including us in your wonderful and rich lineup of programming in the Zoomiverse and also in the real world. And please, everyone, do tune into the rest of their programming during this time, but also check them out when life returns to looking more like normal, because they're both pretty fantastic. But since life is not normal right now, we are speaking to you from, the Amazon cloud, and about to give you some very coveted secrets about Israeli cookery in your home, cooking from the pantry Israeli style. So Adeena and Mike, you have really interesting yin and yang kind of identities in the culinary world right now. One might say that, Mike, you're the Israeli expat living in the US, cooking Israeli food in your adopted country. You were born in Israel. And Adeena, you are an American who just made Aliyah, moved to Israel, and made a huge splash with your book that's all about Israeli cooking in your home kitchen in Israel. So maybe you guys want to just kick this off by telling us, in your respective kitchens, what kind of food have you been relying on most? What have you been cooking the most during quarantine? And what's borrowing from your Israeli palette of flavors?
Yeah, well, thank you. Gabby, that's a great question. And thank you guys so much for having me here tonight. It's nice to be able to connect with all of our favorite people, albeit virtually. But so this is the most amount I've ever cooked in my home ever. And I obviously love food. I love cooking. I love Israeli food. But I orchestrate like restaurants and teams of people now. So I would say what I think that I mentioned to you the other day, Gabby, like I'm shocked at how much I still really love cooking with this kind of food. I don't think there's ever really a meal, with the exception of like a breakfast or two, that wanders too far off of like the food that I love, you know? So excessive lemon, salt, charcoal, obviously spices like za'atar, sumac, baharat, those things kind of end up in everything that I cook.
It's so interesting. And what has been your go-to? Is there one dish that's always on your table at some point during the day as you're cooking up your different meals?
I don't know if there's one thing particular. I mean, I think that tahina in some shape is always there, you know, whether it's like a sauce or it gets turned into like an emulsified dressing for salad, or I don't know. I mean, I guess that's basically it, but tahina is basically on my table all the time. Ironically, as I say this to you, I'm like, that's what distinguished me as like a little bit different. I think growing up in Pittsburgh, like there was always tahina on the table, you know? It'd be like Wonder Bread. My mom would make like stir-fried chicken with like cashews or whatever, and there'd be a little like tub of like tahina on the table. So it's not unlike that.
Yeah, it's still going.
It's still going. Minus the MASH reruns that we used to watch during dinner, but
I'm sure you could find that on Hulu or something. Adeena, how about you? What's your cooking life like right now? And your country is open again, so that, you know, maybe you have to turn back the clock a little bit and to remember what it was like during quarantine.
I mean, restaurants aren't open yet. They're open for some takeaway, but I'm in a serious home cooking groove right now. I would say lemons and preserve. I would say the condiments are the things that are the sort of through line through all of my cooking. Like some of them are in the book, like schlug, preserved lemon paste, garlic confit, just like all those kinds of things that I keep in my side of my fridge that I use to make like a lot of different meals all the time. So, and I would say like the kind of the staples that I always have that I'm cooking with constantly are eggs, like for every meal, whether it's scrambled eggs, soft-boiled eggs, made them into a quiche, use them for something. Tomatoes, obviously cherry tomatoes that I roast or I put in salads, or I just eat out of hand. And probably the third is Feta cheese or Bulgarian cheese, which I find I can never get enough of. I love the saltiness and the richness of it. And I kind of have been experimenting with, you know, keeping things longer. So I've been creating my own salty brine and suspending my feta in it. So it lasts for weeks. I can't even believe I never did that before. Basically, I take my block of feta and I just create a salt water solution and suspend the feta in it, and it just keeps going. So that's been one of my stretching techniques of Corona, of which there have been quite a few, which is, you know.
Yeah, it's genius. I was going to ask both of you, I mean, how has the, you know, lockdown affected your shopping? Like Adeena, I was so surprised to hear all these luscious, fresh foods that you're describing, because for me, at least, that's really the like gold, you know, that it's so hard to come by right now.
Yeah, I feel we have a little bit of survivor's guilt over here because we know how much people are struggling in the States. So I feel a little bit indulgent talking about it, but I have been able to get produce throughout the pandemic. I live right near the Carmel market in Tel Aviv, and although the market was closed, there were a few vendors that were open here and there, and all of the local makolets, which are kind of like the small markets that every Israeli neighborhood has several of, started to supply produce, and pretty good produce because it's Israel. So even if you couldn't make it to the Shuk, you could pick up some nice peppers or some lemons at the corner store. So we were really fortunate, but I think that what changed for me is just, I was just making quick in and outs for shopping and really trying to make maximum use out of every single thing in my fridge in a way that I never had before, and just never realized how wasteful I was, even though I have the skills to cook and make anything I want. I'm sure Mike would agree, all of us, that just, I would never throw away. I pick through my herbs now to like make sure that I'm using every single piece of good parsley that there is in the bunch, or, you know, all those kind of things, just repurposing everything. So.
And to hear you say that you were not dawdling at the market is huge. If anyone who is watching right now has read Sababa, which is Adeena's cookbook, or read her great article in Eater, which was asking the Israeli government, why did you close the Shuk, which is the outdoor market, when you let the big supermarkets stay open? If you haven't checked out either of those, I really hope that you do. You'll see that Adeena has a very personal and loving relationship with the Shuk and talks a lot to the vendors. So the fact that you're in and out, Adeena, is a sea change for you.
Yeah, it was. I mean, I think, you know, I spend a lot of time there. Mike spends a lot of time there. I think it's the kind of the first place he goes when he gets to Tel Aviv. And, you know, for me, it's my touchstone in Israel, and it was a big part of my absorption process here. And it really, I think that, you know, similar to how people say, just ask a taxi driver what's going on in Israel with the real news. Like, you just sort of talk to the members of the Shuk and ask them what is going on. And they were pretty traumatized by this whole thing. They were getting a lot of mixed messages from the government of what they could do and not do. And they felt sidelined while, you know, big business supermarkets could stay open. And it was pretty frustrating. Things are back to normal. I mean, not back to normal, but the market is open and people are wearing masks. It's not everybody, but Israel has had very, very, very few confirmed cases of corona in the last week. So I think they're sort of, we're hewing to the curve and hoping that we can maintain that here. So yeah.
Got to knock on wood. And Mike, I know you muted yourself for a sec because your dog was barking, but giving you a chance to unmute, I really want to know how you've been provisioning these days. I mean, there's like kind of a two-part question. One, of course, everyone, including me, wants to know, where are you getting the ingredients here that really recreate that Israeli flavor for you? Because we want to cook from your book and get those results. But also in this time of scarcity, how are you getting your shopping done?
So that's a great question. Like, it's pretty interesting. Our major produce purveyors that supply the restaurants have all switched to doing home deliveries. So Farm Art, which is our Philly one, and then Baldor in New York is actually, I think they're delivering like 10,000 to 10,000 homes or something a day on the eastern seaboard. So it's really crazy. I mean, people use the word pivot all the time in food service right now, and most of it is nonsense because it's like scraping by. But I think that actually the big produce purveyors are making it happen, and they're connecting the consumer to the farmers and to the farms that are like in real trouble right now, probably better than anybody. So we've had the luxury of, I obviously have a really good relationship with all of our purveyors. So whenever I want, like 5 days a week, we get pretty awesome home deliveries. I try to stay away from supermarkets. I just feel like if there's like one place that you would contract something, it would be like either a supermarket or like an airport or an airplane rather. And the fact that like it's still restaurants, you know, the way that we're opening in Pennsylvania, restaurants are like at the end of it all. And I'm like, come on, like it doesn't make any sense, but that's sort of besides the point. So I've been staying away. Farmers markets have opened up here as well, but I also think that's like a little bit weird. And I think with the Israeli pantry, the staples that are the sort of like non-perishables, the spices, the tahina, the silan, the rosewater, orange blossom, olive oil, pickles, ferments, brines, preserves, those things now in quarantine, but also in like life, the way that we express Israeli food is with all of those things that I just mentioned, and those are here. So It's very easy to pick up asparagus and make like tabbouleh with preserved lemon and like ramp greens or whatever it is that we have to sort of imply or express what I think Israeli food is, you know, from like global perspective, you know? So in a way, it fits in line with what it is that we've been doing for like a decade, you know? What I like, what Adeena said, which is like, man, we are wasteful. Like I really love to utilize everything. It's a practice of ours. It's the way that we run our businesses. I mean, that's how you are effective at handling food costs and not promoting waste. But what is amazing now is like, I'm actually taking like shitty herbs and like turning them into things because I don't want to take another trip. I have a fridge full of things, and this is the worst time to be wasting food. And the way that this pandemic has expressed so many faults of ours, I mean, food insecurity is there's just so much to say about that. But even for me, who like professionally handles food, knows how to manipulate and tinker with things and not waste, it's been a challenge, you know? So I've been using, I stuffed romaine leaves the other night. You know, that were going bad. Yeah, they're amazing. And so I haven't been throwing out anything. I actually had Bulgarian feta brine that I brined Brussels sprouts in. So I've been using brine to preserve different vegetables, which is really cool.
Very cool.
And yeah, so I've actually really enjoyed it. And it's been a really amazing sort of exercise. But it's a strange thing. I mean, I can call a purveyor and get food delivered here tomorrow, or I could go to like Whole Foods and put on like an N94 mask and get it. But I mean, that's like a very small fragment of Philadelphia right now that can do that. So while I'm doing that, we've got like public school children to the north, south, and west and east in Camden, New Jersey, that we're relying on public schools to actually feed them, you know? And so it's just, the way that this has sort of shook society a little bit or sort of ripped off this cloak that we were living under has been really powerful. Which is why I'm stuffing romaine and braising it, because I'm like, no way are we throwing anything out. I would like to compost, but I live in South Philadelphia and I feel like it would just be like a feral cat playground in my backyard. So I'm not doing
After this call, I'll connect you with my husband, who just started our own compost, because we used to compost in the city and now we have fled. And it's easier than you think, especially if someone else like your spouse does it. I do want to ask you, what was in the romaine leaves, stuffed romaine leaves? Because we're all going to try to make this when this Zoom conference is done.
So it was stuffed with chicken. Actually, it was like I braised thighs the night before, and I took the drumsticks and minced them and then caramelized the skin and onions and then like pistachios. I think I might have had artichoke scraps in there too, I think. Put them in there, a little bit of egg. And yeah, that was it. The rice did it. And then you just like roll them up. And I bought actually, which I never do, but like lemon and lime juice, you know, just because
bottles?
Pre-bottled lemon
those
and
little,
lime.
like lemon, those little funny lemon squeeze bottles.
I got
those too.
I got the bougie like glass ones that are not like citric acid slurry. So then yeah, just tons of lemon juice and a little bit of water, and then actually onion scraps too, like onion peels and skin on the bottom of the pan, so there's no contact with the leaves. And they cooked for like, it was shocking. I cooked them to cook the rice, so it cooked for like, you know, an hour at low temperature. And after you cool them entirely, they're really stable and they eat like grape leaves. They're really, really good.
Incredible. I never would have guessed. Adeena, have you made any interesting culinary discoveries during this time?
I would say, yes, 2 days ago, I made my own beef tallow for the first time. I made beef stock. So I skimmed the fat off the top of the stock, and there was quite a bit because I used a lot of marrow bones because that's what I had in the freezer. I combined like a lot of bones and a bit like an unidentified chunk of beef in my freezer that ended up being, after it was cooked, a piece of tongue, actually, interestingly.
Oh.
And so then I took all that fat off and I rendered it in a small saucepan until all of the liquid kind of bubbled out of it. And then I had this beautiful golden fat that I put in a jar, and it kind of solidified so quickly on its own in my apartment. And I had the goal, I'm going to try tomorrow. There's a restaurant around the corner from our house called M25 that a lot of us love, and they cook their potatoes in beef fat. And that was kind of my inspiration, because they just take all the scraps from the butcher shop that they use for their own restaurant, and they render beef tallow out of that. But I've made schmaltz that way before from chicken soup. I've skimmed the fat off of chicken soup and done that rendering thing, and it's nice because it has a little bit of the flavors of whatever you're making the chicken soup with, as opposed to just a pure schmaltz. It has a little carroty flavor or earthy, like celery. So I'm interested to see how this rendered beef fat like behaves when I use it to fry. I'm gonna make French fries with it, maybe, or I don't have that much, but I think I can do like a sheet pan potato kind of thing. So that's one thing that I've been doing, which is
it tastes like a tongue sandwich.
I don't know. I'm excited to try it though. I'm gonna sort of do like we replaced the Folgers coffee. Like, I'm not gonna tell my husband. I'm just gonna make the potatoes and see what happens. So I've been doing that. I have been kind of like trying out new kinds of, like, we all get into sort of routines with the kind, like, I think when we shop, like the kind of lettuce we buy, the kind of herbs we buy, and I've just kind of been branching out. Like, if something's not available, I'll just buy, I typically in the past, like, I haven't really loved escarole, like, but like I've been buying it because it's available, and like I'm using it and liking it, just maybe making a more lemony dressing to kind of counteract the bitterness or whatever. So I think it's just about being adaptable and flexible in this time, and kind of like opening your eyes to like the possibilities of every ingredient. And kind of in the same vein as what Mike was saying, I think the thing about the Israeli condiments is, like, if you can just take one flavor and use it to sort of elevate a meal, like, that's what these things are so good for. Like, if you just have plain rice, just put some chopped preserved lemon in there, and all of a sudden it's like something completely different that transport you somewhere else and like changes the whole. You don't have to do a whole elaborate thing where you use 9 different spices and make it a whole, like, involved thing. You can just use one targeted condiments, put slug on a piece of meat, or use baharat in a dessert, or use preserved lemon somewhere. Like, it's just gonna like change your viewpoint on something that maybe you've been making a certain way for a long time. That's how I tend to use all those kind of things.
It's so smart, and I feel like a lot of us are cooking every single meal, which is not really what most of us are used to. I don't know if any of us are used to doing that. And
No.
Just having a condiment to kind of change the paradigm of the dinner or the lunch or even the breakfast, it just brings some excitement into your life when, sometimes it's hard these days to tell the difference between yesterday and tomorrow. So that is such a great suggestion. And it's a great segue. I was gonna just kind of throw some pantry staples at both of you and ask you what you've been doing with them. Mike, in the Zahav cookbook, you have a really fun little subhead for the rice chapter. I don't know if you remember this. Do you remember? It's rice is easy, perfection is hard.
Yes.
You remember writing that?
I do, because I'm reminded of it every day of my life.
Yeah. So what are you doing with rice these days?
Okay, so what I did last night with rice was onion, garlic, celery, caramelized, but like cooked it in a shitload of olive oil with Lior's Devora blend, which is actually like a falafel. Yeah, Lior Lev-Serkaz, who owns Labora Peace, he made a spice blend for us called Devora, which is after my favorite falafel shop in Karkor in Israel. So it's got like, I don't know, he never really tells me exactly what's in them, but I would imagine like a coriander-y, garlicky, sort of cilantro kind of situation. So I would say like an onion, 2 ribs of celery, 3 cloves of garlic, 2 tablespoons of Devora, a 1/4 cup of olive oil cooked for like an hour. And and then rice, and a little bit of lemon zest, and yeah, that was it. Excuse me. Thank you. So yeah, that's what I did. But I like the beautiful thing about rice and what we have right now is that you can literally process whatever thing that can be liquefied in your house: green peppers, carrots, like tomatoes, whatever, onions, and that can be a cooking medium for your rice. Like a lot of people, we know water or we know chicken stock or whatever. If you're making risotto, you do like wine, but you can steam rice in any liquid. And my favorite actually is carrot juice and saffron, and we do that in the Zahav book as well.
Wow.
To me, it tastes like crustacean broth. Straight up carrot juice, saffron, salt, garlic. It tastes like lobster stock, and it's like wonderful.
It's
So
probably 'cause the color is similar. It's like a little optical illusion.
exactly.
Beautiful. That's so smart.
Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah, you're like, yeah, you can, you're done now. You did
It's all
it.
this hair. I grow the hair out. It's like I actually have good ideas.
Sample. What about you, Adeena? What's on the rice menu these days?
So I make rice all the time, and my new revelation is that I'm not rinsing my rice anymore, which I think is like causing many Jewish, especially Sephardic grandmothers to roll over in their graves. But
Yeah, like sacrilege.
yeah, I just I'm finding that the rice, if rinsed, gets a little mushy and disintegrates faster. And also, you know, a lot of times you're rinsing rice and then you leave it for a few minutes before you kind of get it going. So I've been finding that it actually remains a little more like singular, like in that sort of Uncle Ben's way, even though it's the opposite, like Persian rice or basmati rice, by not rinsing. And similar to Michael, I've been doing like these sort of blends. I'll take even a whole lemon, like or half a lemon with the zest on it, and put it in the blender with herbs, olive oil, garlic, cloves, salt, and pepper, and make sort of like a herb and lemon blend. And then I'll stir that into the rice with stock and cook it. And then like if I serve that with chicken, I'll almost use that as like, you know, like the doña sauce in Texas at like the taco places, that green hot sauce kind of thing. So I'll use more of that like on the chicken, on the rice, kind of like to reinforce those herby flavors. So I do that. I make my, you know, I call my jeweled rice all the time, swapping in different nuts, different chopped herbs, different dried fruits. Caramelized onions are kind of the non-negotiable there, I would say. Just like tons and tons of onions. That's another great staple. It's not necessarily, you know, only exclusive to the Israeli kitchen, but if you're home all day and you've gotten a bunch of onions in your farm box, or you can get them for cheap, just like take 5 pounds, slice them really thin, and just caramelize them for a long time, and then keep that mound of onions in your fridge, and like there are limitless ways that you can use that. It's just like there's nothing that doesn't taste better with the caramelized onion in it. So like that's another like tip that I would suggest.
What strikes me is how special both of your rice dishes sound, and they're made with very achievable ingredients. I mean, everyone might not have saffron in their pantry, but they definitely have carrots and onions and, you know, dried fruit, quite possibly, yes, nuts. And I think that's kind of what's been a little bit hard, is making some meals feel special within the confines of what we're able to get right now. Have you guys, either of you, had to cook any special occasion meal during this quarantine period?
So although my husband's 60th birthday was on Passover Eve.
Wow.
And we were in the heart of, you know, full lockdown in Israel. And actually Passover night, nobody was allowed to move more than 100 yards from their home in the entire country. So I was with Jay, and, you know, obviously the prospect of making a full Seder for 2 was really daunting. And luckily what he requested was meatloaf.
Yay, Jay.
It was his birthday, and that's what he wanted. So that's what I made him. So I made him a killer meatloaf. and really good mashed potatoes and coleslaw and all the things that he wanted for his birthday. And it got me off the hook of making a huge Seder meal that I was not really in the mood to make, to be honest. It just didn't feel like the year for me. And I was able to like fulfill my husband's Proustian meal from his childhood, from his dad's roadside diner that his dad owned growing up. So that was like a really, so to me that was nice because it was a special meal, but it was a very kind of prosaic menu. And like those two things came together really nicely for me. But I haven't had to do any, I've done a lot of cooking demos and classes, but I haven't done anything, I would say, super elaborate at all. No.
I love that though. It's so heartwarming.
Well, you know, we cook to please those we love. So really, you know.
True. It's
Yeah.
true. That's really special. No, I mean, I remember Passover was like such a drag, and I had matzo ball soup and like cried into it.
That's it. Yeah. That's
yeah, that was it. But I think
part
that
of the Seder though,
so I don't know. I feel like actually there has not been one special meal. My youngest son's birthday is on June 8th, and more than likely I'll be making his birthday cake. But I think that it's like every meal that I get to cook with them has been really awesome. And that is a product of being stuck, cooped up in a house, you know, and I do think there's a sort of bright side to that. So I feel like, as Adeena said, you know, we cook to please other people, whether you're doing it at home for your family or in a restaurant full of hundreds of people. It's the connection that you get, or the joy that you bring, or, you know, every sort of aspect of hospitality that I love. So being able to cook with them and like having my youngest like peel garlic with his little hands has been great, and making pancakes with my son, like those have all been incredibly special. Really special, but it's hard, man. Pesach was such a drag, dude. It's the worst, like so depressing. And, you know, we've had Shabbat meals, which have been weird because typically I'm working, like Fridays and Saturdays aren't awesome nights to take off in restaurants. So I'm usually working them. But to have Shabbat with like 3 or 4 people, you know, it's also really.
Yeah. And just like the idea of cooking in smaller quantities, like I'm used to, if I cook, I make something for 6 or 8 people because I just know that inevitably I'm going to be able to pawn it off on somebody, either a guest or somebody who's visiting or walking, or someone who pops over. And so like I've really had to scale back the amounts that I'm cooking, obviously also out of necessity for not wasting, but also just because, you know, really reevaluating the idea of why we cook. Like I've just been cooking for myself and my husband, and it has taken on a less festive and indulgent tone than I would say I typically approach cooking in that way. Like obviously I cook a lot every day, but there is always the possibility of a celebration or a gathering. And when that is taken out of the picture, it definitely does change the way you view cooking and the way you choose to cook. So I think that actually my ingredients and the way I cooked has just gotten a lot more simple, not only because of true lack of access, but also sort of an emotional / cultural shift in like why we're cooking right now, you know, which I think has had some upsides for people in a way and benefits, like stripping it down and looking at why we cook. And, you know, a lot of people are cooking because they need to, and learning that it just, you know, it doesn't have to be a huge deal to cook every day. You know, it can just be for your sustenance.
Well, let's talk about some of those ingredients that have survived the great austerity of 2020 and that are really part of your essential day-to-day cooking. Let's talk about spices, because that is really one of the defining characteristics of what makes really any meal take on its identity. And spices play such a vital part in the Israeli, you know, catalog of great dishes. So tell us, you know, you mentioned Devora spice, Mike, but even if we weren't going into the, you know, custom spice blend category, are there any single spices that you're really leaning on, or, you know, more of the, you mentioned Baharat also some of the more like codified spice blends from the Israeli kitchen. Like, what do you reach for these days?
Okay, so one, I feel like I've started to use whole cumin seeds a lot. And actually, I had a sesame bagel and I dried it out and then I put it in the blender, finished it with whole cumin and sesame seeds, and it made the best schnitzel crust, like the best, because the seeds sort of pop. So I feel like I've been on this sesame, actually, and speaking to rice as well, I made plov, which is like the Russian pilaf with whole cumin seeds. Amazing, so good. And I've always loved cumin, but I think it's kind of a different, there's a subtlety to the seeds and a textural quality that I really feel like I've been missing. I have a hard time not using halaj, the Yemenite, like halaj shomarak, like the soup one, which is turmeric, cumin, and black pepper. You could basically do anything with that blend. And it's super good. And then sumac, like we're doing a lot of salads, right? So I feel like, why not just put sumac on everything all the time? Like there's no reason to not. So mostly that. I'm sure Adeena is doing the same, right?
Definitely all those. And I would say one of them that I'm actually using a lot more even is turmeric. And I think one of the reasons I'm using it is because it's bright and sunny and golden yellow and it makes me happy. And also when I put it in like a chicken or something, it reminds me of street food because so many street food dishes use turmeric, and that color of like food on a grill with that golden hue just kind of makes me happy. And like that dusky flavor and the bright tone like really are doing it for me. So I'm going through a lot of that. And I think also just I'm making a lot of chicken, and like paprika is just like such a natural thing for like a roast chicken or pieces of chicken. And I kind of I'm sort of going back to some of my childhood, things my mom used to make a lot. So I'm definitely using a lot of that. But if we're going in the Israeli direction, I obviously use a lot of za'atar. I'm shocked that word hasn't come up yet in this conversation. I use it in crackers that I roll out and cut and bake. I sprinkle it on challah instead of like sesame seeds, or on rolls, obviously on labneh with olive oil. I really like it, aside from the fact that it's probably the most recognizable of those. But I also like my other favorite is always baharat, because I like things that are like AC/DC, like it can go sweet or savory. So I use it in meat. It's like natural places in like ground, anything that's like Levantine with ground meat, like a stuffed something or a stew. But I also find that I use it a lot in desserts. I'm working on my new Shabbat cookbook, and I just did like a baharat banana bread like for Saturday morning. So
Wow.
and then
Good.
I did like, so yeah, so like I just like that, I like the idea of taking something that has a very American feeling and then fusing it with my life in Israel right now. And so like that's a perfect combination. Like baharat has cinnamon in it, has cloves, but then it adds black pepper and all these other more savory elements. So it's kind of really surprising. And these blends can you don't want to think about how they're supposed to be used. You just want to think about how you want to use them, taste them, smell them, and then just kind of go to town using them however you want to. So those are some.
That's one of the things that's so great about your cookbook, which I really hope that everyone who hasn't had a chance to cook from before this talk will have a chance to now. And I think this is a very good segue, actually. The next big pantry item that has been so sought after, especially at the beginning of the quarantine period, were beans and dried beans. And anyone who tried to buy them for mail order online or even find them in the store would find that there were limits to how many bags you could buy, or they were just plain sold out, or there was a wait list. Beans have been very precious. Hummus is one of the great hallmarks of the Levantine and Israeli and Middle Eastern kitchen. Mike, for those of us lucky to still have chickpeas right now, please demonstrate, it's the moment we've all been waiting for, the 5-minute hummus recipe.
The best hummus.
Thank you guys so much. I would love to. That was a great segue. And wait, you, Gabby, in the real world, I walked you through a bean preparation the other day.
You
right?
did. You did.
Did you guys make it?
I screenshot it and sent it to Bernie, my husband, who is a bean cook. And the beans that we had, it was for adzuki beans, everyone, which are, you know, Japanese red, little adorable red beans. They're like 2 years old, the bag, and didn't think we had the time before dinner to revive them and make sure that we could still eat them. So we did Great Northerns instead. But when we do your recipe, you will be the first to know.
Okay, good. Very good. All right, so I'm going to just run you guys through our quick 5-minute hummus. This is what we make in Israeli Soul, our second Israeli cookbook. And this is sort of like the recipe that you use when you realize you don't have like 3 days to make anything. So we go with canned beans, which everybody hates on all the time. The reality is, unless you sort of know where you're getting your dried beans from, the likelihood of you getting quality beans canned is much greater than high. So you could go to like your Trader Joe's or Whole Foods and get like fancy canned beans that have been cooked really, really well, and they're organic and all that stuff. So this recipe you're not going to get quite as smooth as the Zahav hummus, but it's very good, and it also takes 5 minutes. Garlic, okay? This is about half a clove, okay? Juice of a lemon, and you can also use like the lemon juice if you want as well. Boom. And this is like the thing. Everybody's got their own idea of hummus. Like, to me, Israeli and Palestinian hummus is about the tahina. It's not like a garlic and lemon bomb. It's the relationship between the chickpeas and the sesame kind of leading the chickpeas. I don't know. That's how I articulate it. So I don't want this to be like super sour, and it shouldn't taste like Caesar salad dressing. So we just use a little lemon garlic, and we pulse this first just for a second to start the garlic ceviche a little bit, because we don't want like garlic breath for the next 5 days. We're going to go a little bit of salt as well. And you can use a blender for this as well. I've got just like a home sort of Roboku. Give me 1 second. Okay, so we just break it up for a second. Okay, now we also developed this recipe literally using the jars. Okay, so 1 small jar, this is 16 ounces of sum tahina, which is my favorite. Really, really good. All right, and then 2 cans of whatever chickpeas, and you just make sure they're drained really, really well. As you guys know, I'm sure a lot of you know, that the issue with tahina is that it's like oil, it's like sesame oil on the top and then spackle on the bottom. So when you're asked to measure a cup of tahina, it's kind of loaded, you know? So what we wanted to do was to just be able to use the whole jar and just kind of throw it in there. And then, because the tahina and the hummus need ice water, you can basically just take about another, let's call it half a cup, and pour it into your container so you can then get all the good stuff out, okay? And so what we're gonna make first is a tahina sauce, which is like what we call prepared tahina, which can be a dressing, it can be a sauce for fish. Like I said, this is what lives on my table. It's a dip, it's anything. So we're just gonna dump that in there. And I like cumin, ground cumin as well. In my situation here, we'll do a little bit. But like if you wanted to make a sort of like a ranchy or like green garlic, green goddess like dressing, you could add avocado, dill, tarragon to this, and this would make a great sort of like creamy vinaigrette, okay? So let's do a little more salt, cumin, and this is the water. And at this point too, this looks not edible. This looks like a science project gone wrong. We're gonna spin it.
Hey everyone. So Mike is doing his thing with the food processor right now. So just wanted to let you know that we're about to open the chat. If you have questions, you can go ahead and start typing them in. Annie, are we good to go?
Cool. Yeah, guys, I'm just gonna mute myself and then spin this hummus, all right?
Okay, so we'll start chat. Yeah, so Mike's he's gonna finish making hummus, and then everyone can feel free to start asking questions. You can just go down to the little chat icon and just type them in, and we'll start doing that. And then after we're done with the Q&A, I think we'll check back with Mike and see the magic of the kitchen studio. So while we're waiting for everyone to start getting their questions together, I just want to give a quick shout out to a couple recipes that I have found to be so useful during this time. In addition to Mike's hummus, which is like the best hummus ever and the easiest, the matbuka in Israeli Seoul also has about 3 ingredients and is the most delicious and yields so much. You'll be eating it forever. Every party I go to, it's like I bring the hummus and I bring the matbuka and everyone is blown away. And also in Sababa, Adeena's book, when it was colder, the melted cabbage, you guys, oh my God, there's like, again, 4 ingredients in it. It is the most economical, most delicious, yields the most amount of food of any recipe I have ever encountered. If you don't think you like cabbage, this one will completely change your opinion. And now that it's warmer, the artichokes in Sababa with white wine and garlic and lemon have like completely changed my understanding of what an artichoke is and how it's cooked. So thank you for that, Adeena, so much. Okay, all right, so we have some questions. Let's see. Someone asked if MOFAD is doing a koji class. Yes. I will not go into what we're covering in the koji class because I think you should come and you'll find out. So that's next Sunday, so make sure that you sign up for that. It's on our calendar. Okay, let's see. Okay, someone recently visited Bulgaria and learned that most of the Bulgarian Jews made Aliyah after 1948. Michael, given your Bulgarian Jewish roots, are there any Bulgarian Jewish ingredients or dishes that have become part of Israeli cuisine?
I'm back. I heard Bulgarian and I was like, right through it. Yeah, so Bulgarian food is really, really fascinating because the Bulgarian Jews are mostly Sephardic from Spain, but were conquered by the Ottomans for so long. So like everyone talks about, there's so much sort of politics involved in Israeli food. Quite honestly, the most spreading, the most appropriation was all by the Ottomans. That's why I think actually Levantine food is so similar. It's there. And so Bulgarians were definitely part of that. Bulgarians and Greeks and Turks essentially cook the same thing as well. So feta, definitely. Peppers of every single variety, definitely. Really good paprika. And like Bulgarian kebabs, I think are the best. They're top notch. So I think that those are really good. And then like just, I know it's not an ingredient, but sort of the pastries and the borekas are really important to Bulgarian cuisine as well. Not only because they were introduced to Israel by Bulgaria, but they were, you can look at the lineage of Sephardic Jewry post-Inquisition all the way to Israel with that dish. It's really fascinating. And I also think that the Frenchies stole puff pastry actually by Sephardic Jews. That's my theory as well. So those are my thoughts. But yeah, it's really fascinating. What's also very interesting is that the king of Bulgaria during World War II was really sympathetic to the Jews and told the Nazis that he would deal with Jews on his own, and actually had these low-level labor camps that were, my grandfather all treated it like summer camp, basically. And so most of the Bulgarian Jews actually lived, which is rare amongst diasporic Jewry. All right, back to hummus.
Thank you, Michael. Cool. For both of you, if you could pick one recipe for someone who is new to Israeli cooking, what would you start with? Great question.
I mean, Michael says that tahina is like the mother sauce of Jewish cooking and of Israeli cooking. And I think that's like a good place to start, like making a really good tahina sauce that you can eat alone or add to hummus. Or in my book, I add different colors to it by adding roasted beets or herbs or turmeric. I think that's one is a good one. I think, I mean, Shakshuka is one that's very popular right now, and I think that for good reason. Just, it does incorporate tomatoes, which are really a flagship of modern Israeli cooking, and the tomatoes are so good here. So that's another, I think, another good staple that you could make from the Israeli kitchen that I think would serve you well. I also think, even though they're not Israeli, like if you can just get some preserved lemons in your fridge and let them sit there for a few months, like it's going to reap so many benefits for you for so long, with very minimal effort, that like I would recommend that as well.
I'm back, everybody. Back.
Yeah, you want to chime in on that one, Mike?
I have a question, Michael. Why do some people actually save the liquid from the can of chickpeas and add it to their hummus? Why do you recommend draining really, really well? Like, what is your theory there?
Well, my theory is that I feel like if you have too much liquid from the chickpeas, I just feel like I have better control of the hummus. And what I don't want is like super watery, and I also don't like the chickpea water that you get from a can is probably a little bit different than what you get when you boil it a la minute, Yeah. But you know what you can do with the canned chickpea water? It's you can make aquafaba, which is this sort of vegan meringue. It's amazing. You can make meringue cookies. You can take chickpea water out of a can and whip it in like a Hobart or KitchenAid or whatever, and it makes vegan meringue. It's like fantastic.
Right, it loses its chickpea flavor. It doesn't taste like chickpeas.
It doesn't taste like gaseous or like savory. It's really, really cool. All right, so check it out, guys. This is really, really simple. I'm just going to spoon this guy down. And like I said, this isn't like, this is very, very good for being like 5 minutes, And if you've got a food processor that is really, really small, I would basically just add almost ice instead of the water. So it can take, it's got to work. What you don't want to do is have heat, right? So that's why we use cold water. The heat from the motor can actually seize the tahina. So you always have to counteract it with something cold. I'm going to just pour a bit of olive oil on it, all right?
And I just want to let everyone know that I'm going to follow up with an email, and I'm going to send you the recipe for this hummus. And a couple questions about the spices that were mentioned in this talk. I'll make sure that you have all the info, and I'll link you to the Lior Lev Sakars. Oh, that looks good. Cool. Thank you, Mike. That looks delicious.
So
I wish we were all sitting at the same table eating it together. I'm very sad we're not. Anyway, so I'll send you all the info, so not to worry if you missed something that came up during the conversation. We have time for just a couple more questions. Let's see. Mike, can you hear me? You good?
Yes, I can. Yep.
Okay. This question comes from Lauren, who was lucky enough to eat at Zahav and had the cauliflower, and she wants to know what you recommend for roasting cauliflower.
Okay, so what I recommend for roasting cauliflower is a good amount of oil, definitely. And if I were making this at home, what I would do is cut the cauliflower into florets. I would save the leaves because you can braise those and they're delicious. Cauliflower leaves, like pickled cauliflower leaves, are my favorite thing ever. You could save the core as well, and that's really good to either saute with some butter or also pickle. And then the florets, what I would do is cut them small and pre-salt them for at least an hour. And then I would put them into a saute pan so it could hold some of the oil, and I would blast them in a broiler in the oil so they get like almost sort of like, air fried, I guess. And then for a sauce, I would go labneh or Greek yogurt with a little bit of raw garlic, lemon, cayenne, and a bunch of herbs.
Delish, thank you.
Yep.
Adeena, for the brine feta, what was the ratio of water and salt that you were speaking of earlier?
I would say per cup of water, start with about a teaspoon of salt and just taste it. You want it to be nice and salty, like to match the saltiness of the feta. And the salt is really what's going to help you preserve that feta. So you don't want to, if you're going to do it, like go for it. It shouldn't be like inedibly salty, but it should have that nice really briny salt level of maybe like a salt pickle kind of a situation, like a, pickle brine kind of a thing, maybe a little bit lighter, but also you want to keep the feta submerged in the liquid because, that also just helps. The main thing it does is that it prevents exposure to the elements and oxygen, and it just like makes it last so much longer. So I'd say a teaspoon to a cup to start.
Great. Adeena, do you have an Israeli wine recommendation?
Sure. So my friends from Covenant Winery in Northern California now have a winery in Israel, and they're making really beautiful and somewhat reasonably priced wines. I really like those. I'm a big fan of Pelter Wines, which are made in very northern Israel in Ein Zivan. A lot of the best wines in Israel are made in the north. You can get Pelter Wines in New York. I love their Sauvignon Blanc. I'm really a big fan of white wines. And then there's another winery called Shvo, S-H-V-O, which is really popular. If you're looking for wines that are more readily available in the States and are reasonably priced, I think Recanati is a really good. They have a really nice range, and they're a little bit more interesting than some of the more conventional wineries you may have heard of. And another one is Flam, F-L-A-M, and I can send these all to you, Sari, and you can send them out to people. As you guys know, Israeli wines are amazing, and they combine sort of like entrepreneurial spirit that Israel is known for, startup nation kind of stuff, with a lot of science and technology and working the land and constantly tweaking and elevating the product. So they keep getting better every year.
Great. Thanks, Adeena. Yes, I would love to see those and also drink them. Great. Last question. This is from Mr. Josh. She's a lot of hummusiyas in Israel, predominantly the Arabic ones that garnish the hummus with a sauce on top that looks like a watery olive oil. What is it? Is it reserved cooking liquid from the chickpeas?
I think that if it's got like warm chickpeas on top of it, then usually it's probably that. It's like a little bit of liquid. And then, Adeena, what's like the sort of garlicky, lemony?
It's called tatbila, and it's a combination of onion and garlic and lemon juice that is like kind of chopped and like really bracing and strong. And I think the idea is to cut the richness of the hummus. So obviously some people also dip an entire raw onion into their hummus and eat it that way, but tatbila is kind of a really like nice sharp condiment that you can just
like
kind of
a relish kind of, right?
Like a relish, exactly, like a loose relish, I would say.
Yeah, but I feel like there's like Abu Hassan, that's always like a scoop of hot chickpeas out of the ronda that they cook them in with like more liquid on top.
Yeah, there's a tatbila recipe in Sababa with the hakusem hummus. But I mean, there are a lot of different varieties, like Mike was saying, and different people put different things on, and they all have like individual spins.
Perfect. Yum. Okay, well, I'm officially hungry. So I think it's time for dinner. Mike, Adeena, Gabriella, thank you so much. This was so informative. I'm so excited to cook after this conversation and try new, delicious, inventive things. And I love what you said, Gabriella, about just changing the paradigm of what we're all cooking right now, because we certainly need that. So thank you, everyone, for joining us and coming from all over, and like big shout out to Adeena for coming to us from Tel Aviv. Please get some rest tonight, and to everyone else, just stay in touch. Please keep being safe. Stay home if that's the smart thing to do where you live. And please, again, follow MOFAD, follow Gastro Obscura on our newsletters, on our social media platforms. I will absolutely be following up with all of this information, all these wonderful, beautiful tips. And that's it. Thank you all so much.
Thank you, Sari. Thank you, everybody.
Laila Tov.
Bye. Laila Tov.
Get some sleep, Adeena.
I will.
Thanks so much for joining us today, everybody. And be sure to check out Gastro Obscura. We have way more great live experiences coming up. Lots of great stories and videos, and they're all part of our Wonder from Home initiative. And we hope to see you again on another experience soon. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Adeena.